Good evening, YouTubers. Well, I've not made a video for a few days. That's because I've been on the sofa. I have good days, and bad days. And if you don't see me around for a little while, it's because I've been laid up. Anyway, we're going to talk about my time machine, which arrived about a week ago, actually. But I haven't had a chance to make a video about it. And I've been fiddling with it and titivating it. It was actually made in 1894. And you think, wow, that's a long time. So it actually took 130 years to get to me, which is quite incredible. I'm actually looking at it now. I'll show you in a little while. And I thought, wow, 130 years old, and it still works. And, it's travelled through time since 1894. But this particular machine is completely worthless. And you think, what? How can it be worthless? It's 130 years old and it still works. It still works. If it was a Winchester underlever rifle or something like that, it'd be worth a fortune. A car. I mean, cars were coming into being invented, weren't they? And movie camera. When was the first movie camera? 1890, I think, 92, somewhere around that mark. I mean, can you imagine if you owned one of the first movie cameras? I mean, that'd be worth. I mean, everything's worth collecting, I suppose. But I love machinery, stuff that come from the Industrial Revolution. And if I did have a real time machine, which you could go back in time, how far back would I actually go in time? And well, not very far actually, because there'd be nothing that would interest me earlier than the 1700s. And there's a reason for that. There was the technology didn't move; it hung, hadn't it? If you go back to the Roman era of ancient Rome, they'd advanced as far as they had in the 1600s. If anything, the 1600s, especially in the UK, was probably less advanced than the Romans, because the Romans, you've got the Ice Age, the Bronze Age, the Iron Age, and they figured out how to smelt iron ore and make knives so they could kill each other out of iron and bronze and things, and nothing really moved on. I mean, you look at the Romans, they had big buildings, quite impressive buildings. They had concrete. They had horses and chariots and carts, and they had ships with sails. And you go to the 1600s, what's changed? Still riding horses, pulling carts, and sailing ships. All right, the cannon did come along at some point, but they weren't very good. I mean, if they hit you, they were devastating. That is why they were catching on, but they were not good. This process of smelting and getting them, and they didn't make the barrels were pathetically horrible. The bore was dreadful. They were so inaccurate. You needed loads of them, and they were expensive to produce. So there was nothing. Technology hadn't moved on at all, really. At all. You go back to 1066, and because British history starts at 1066 if you go to school, and nothing's changed since the Romans. They've got big armies, face each other with spears and things, and batter each other until somebody wins, and horses and armour and cavalry. I mean, the Romans had all that. Nothing changed until the 1700s, when someone in England, I think it was England, a place called Ironbridge, invented the blast furnace. I mean, they already had smelting of iron, but they used charcoal, and it was a bit of a process. All of a sudden, coal, boom, blast furnace, loads of molten metal, and they could pour it into moulds. And they thought, well, what should we make with all this molten metal? So they made a bridge, and they called it Ironbridge, and it's still there to this day. They've just got this great big iron bridge over the River Severn. And it's spectacular, and you think, wow. And from there, everything has snowballed. someone looks and thinks, oh, that's a good idea. How's about this? How's about that? How's about the other? And of course, everyone wants coal. And so railway lines, you can build the railway lines out of steel. Big long lengths of railway lines. And then railways came along. Steam engines came along in the 1700s. They weren't very good until Wilkinson and his boring machine in the... I think it was the Victorian days. I'm not sure when Wilkinson was around, but he designed a boring machine in which he could cut a nice, really straight tube, the bore of inside of what it was for a cannon, really, to make cannons more accurate. And that led on to the steam engines, because the steam engines were good, but they leaked a lot, the early steam engines. And so once Wilkinson came along with his boring machine, they could make smooth bores that made really powerful steam engines. The next thing you know, there's tracks everywhere. There's steam engines doing the work of 1,000 men, hauling coal here, there, and everywhere. And then Whitworth came along with his micrometer, and so all of a sudden you're getting technology after technology after technology. And the Victorian age is particularly interesting. I like the Victorian age very much because it started off with sailing ships, blown by the wind, and horses and carts, and single shot muskets, stand and deliver. And you came out of the Victorian age at the other end with dreadnoughts, steam-driven battleships, The machine gun, Maxim had invented the machine gun, which could just keep on firing forever as long as you had enough bullets for it. And there were a number of things that came along that changed the world really forever. Like I say, the movie camera. The movie camera came out in 1892. I think they demonstrated the first one. That changed the world forever in its own way. And this machine that I've got in front of me came out in 1894, and it was one of those things that the inventor patented and built a factory and thought, right, I'm going to sell this machine. And he did, and he couldn't stop selling it. It was sold out all the time. All the time. Factory couldn't keep up, so he built another factory, and that couldn't keep up. So he built another factory, and that couldn't keep up. And it did. It went on to change the world forever. And back in the day, of course, they were so sought after that everybody wanted. Well, everyone did want one because, it was the thing to have, because compared to what they had previous to that, it was like light years ahead. It's like going from a sailing ship to the Starship Enterprise, all of a sudden, wow, I want one of them, that's cool. Needless to say, the guy who invented it became a multi-millionaire. It was a huge success story, and you think, well, if you've got one of his machines today from 1894, and you've got it sat in front of you, and it's in perfect working order, there's nothing wrong with it, and it still does what it did in 1894, how can it be completely worthless? I am, of course, talking about the sewing machine. Now, it's true, they are absolutely worthless, and loads of women out there will be going, oh, not a sewing machine. And the thing is, they were so popular that Singer himself, this is a Singer, Singer opened a factory in Scotland, and to meet up with the demand for sewing machines in Europe, especially in the UK. And his factory in Scotland probably produced this machine, this very machine. It may have been assembled in Scotland, manufactured in America, brought, because it's an American company, Singer. And then eventually they produced their own machines, and they couldn't keep up demand. They couldn't keep up. They allegedly, the Singer factory in Glasgow in Scotland produced over 36 million machines. 36 million machines, and they supplied the UK and the world. You know, they were exported all around the world, and people couldn't get enough of them. People could not get enough of them. My grandmother was a seamstress. She had one of these big tables with electric motor and things, and she was making parachutes during the Second World War. I mean, I don't know where you would start making a parachute, you know, but that's what she did. She did it for the whole war. She was working in this place that that's all they did. They made big rolls of silk and a huge ball of string, and you just got on with it and made parachutes for the RAF, I suppose. So, I mean, they just couldn't keep up with demand for the machines. They had to have their own foundry. They actually had metal bases. I mean, I'm looking at this thing. I don't know how to use a sewing machine. Okay. But I just think it's an incredible piece of Victorian industrial revolution machinery that's just incredible to see how it works. I've been going through it, oiling it, changing needles and things, and just getting it all tickety-boo so that it works. I haven't even got any cotton. But I'm going to get it working, and I'm going to look at what all those fancy gadgets are that you stick on the end and see what they do. I think it's fascinating, and it's just keeping my mind occupied, I suppose, at the moment. But of course, after the war, they did themselves in, because after the Second World War, they put money into Germany and they put money into Japan as well to sort of help pick the economies back up. The British did a lot for Volkswagen. They got Volkswagen back up and running. And the Americans put money into Japan, and they started producing sewing machines. But they didn't make cast iron sewing machines like these, you know, proper last forever sewing machines. They produced aluminium, bent aluminium frames, and they produced really good sewing machines for a fraction of the price of the Singer. So they really did themselves a mischief, really, because Singer couldn't compete with the Japanese imports. And today, if you wanted a sewing machine, you'd probably go out and buy a Japanese one, as opposed to a Singer. I don't know how to sew, and I'm not going to learn. But I suppose if you wanted a commercial sewing machine, for whatever reason, to produce something, but you can't compete with the Far East. I mean, China, Malaysia, those sorts of places, they can produce clothes cheaper than you can actually make them. Because before, the reason the sewing machine was such a big success was because women had to sew. If you wanted to make a shirt, you had to get the material, cut the material out into shapes, and then sew it all together yourself. It took you hours. It would take you all day to make one shirt, when all of a sudden with a sewing machine you can do it in minutes. And you know, you're looking around and you think, well, I can make money out of this, because most people couldn't afford to pay a tailor. Make me a new suit of clothes. Most people had to just do it themselves, and that's why everyone looked like the same scarecrow, because all the patterns were the same, I suppose, and they're coming out. I can remember my mother had an old Singer years ago. In the 60s, they used to buy patterns and then sit there with tissue paper, cutting them out, and loads of needles and things, and they'd spend all day making a dress or something like that. And today, you could buy a pack of 5 shirts, you know, in a packet, so cheap. I mean, nobody uses a sewing machine anymore. This is why they're worthless. Nobody does it, because it's so cheap to just go online, click online. You want to buy, what do you want to buy? Clothing wise, this, that, the other, click. It's so cheap. Nobody wants to use them anymore, unless you were a specialist, unless you were designing your own clothes, I suppose, or you had particular clients. There's no way you could compete with China, with the Chinese mass-produced garment industry. It's just not going to happen. And it's just a great shame. And I've picked this one up, and like I said, 1874, and it still works. And I'm dead tough with it. I'm figuring, I've got a little manual. I put 1929, it's the manual. But it's the one, and I can read and find out. I've been changing the needle today. and because everything's a bit seized up, you know, because they haven't been used for years. And it's true, you can go to the car boot sale, you can go to yard sales, swap meets, whatever, and you can find these things because people just die. People kept them in the old days and they handed them down from generation to generation. And eventually just nobody was interested in using them anymore. Very few people know how to even use them. I'm one of them. I dare say there are women out there who have got one, quite a fancy one, probably Japanese, and they can do stuff with them, but how often do you do stuff with them? They're just worthless. So they squeeze themselves out of the market by being too good, really. And today, like I say, you can pick up, I think I got this one for 30 quid. And I can't believe it's a fabulous piece of equipment from the Industrial Revolution, built in 1894, and it still works. It's just sitting there in front of me. I'm thinking, what am I going to do with it? Once I've figured out, wife's back from the shops. Once I've figured out what to do with it, I might make a shoulder holster or something. I don't know. Thank you, good night, and may your God go with you.